All right, Colleen, why don't we just start with you introducing yourself?
My name is Colleen Shine. I'm the daughter of Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Shine, an Air Force fighter pilot missing in action in the Vietnam War for 24 years.
Hmm. And your father was one of four siblings who served in Vietnam.
Right. My grandfather was an aide to General Bradley in World War II, and all four of his children served in Vietnam. The oldest, my father, was an Air Force fighter pilot. He flew F-105s on his first mission and A-7s on his second. The next child was my uncle Al Shine, who was a West Point graduate. He was an ARVN advisor and battalion commander in Vietnam with the Army. And then my uncle John was an Army first lieutenant fresh out of West Point when he was killed in action in October of 1970. Their sister Sarah was working with the Red Cross in Vietnam, and she returned home to become a career Army nurse.
Hmm. Yeah, so the draft was not an issue for that family.
No, no one among my father and his siblings were drafted. They volunteered to go, and I think believed in what they were doing in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. So your father was the oldest of the four?
Correct.
And what year did he go for his first tour?
I think his first tour was in 1968. I don't have the dates of it. I could get them for you.
No, it's okay. 1968 is fine. And then after your father came Al.
Right.
And what year did Al go to Vietnam?
I'm going to have to get
That's
get
okay.
all of
I'm
this.
probably going to end up talking to Al anyway, right? So it's I'll
Good.
get that
I
information.
know he was there. I believe he got the Silver Star for valor in battle in June of 1965. So I know he was there then, and he may have had multiple tours of duty, because I recall being in Okinawa as a young girl. My dad was stationed at Kadena Air Base in Okinawa, and my uncle came after one of the surgeries that he had, and there was so much shrapnel in his torso that I remember seeing, and he had bandages on his arms, and it looked like a zipper down his chest. And I remember saying, it looks like a zipper. He said, oh, of course it is a zipper. They've had to give me so many surgeries. They just decided it would be much easier just to zip me up and down. And as a kid, I really, I trusted him, believed him. So I assumed it really was a zipper. It took me a lot of years before I realized it wasn't a zipper, but it was a lot of shrapnel, a lot of pain, and multiple surgeries. So that had to have been between 68 and 70 when we were stationed in Okinawa.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be really easy for me to get the dates of their
Great.
tours. I guess what I'm trying to get at is it's sort of, I guess I went about it in sort of an oblique way, but I'm trying to get a sense of the age difference from oldest to youngest of those four.
Right. I think it's about 2 years between each.
Okay. Okay. And so then came Jonathan, who would have been then 4 years younger than your father.
Sarah might have come first and Jonathan last. So I probably got it wrong.
Okay.
I think that it is, I've got a pyramid picture of them on a swing outside, and I think it is my dad at the bottom, then Sandy, then Sarah, then John. I think that that's correct. I apologize.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Well, what do you remember about those four when you were a kid? I mean, do you have any vivid memories? Were they kind of major players in your life as a child?
My uncle John was just sort of larger than life, fun loving. One of my favorite pictures was me on his shoulders and us riding tricycles. He, big grown man riding a tricycle with me out to the end of the driveway and back as we waited for some family to arrive at a summer home. Mm-hmm. So he was a Christian. I remember his faith carrying through, and he was patriotic. We always had a flag flying wherever we lived. And that meant this summer home where I got to know my aunts and uncles. So I remember that there was a picture in this summer home of him doing the Iron Cross at West Point in gymnastics. So as a girl, I remember always thinking of him as someone who was disciplined. And later, some of his West Point classmates, one of them wrote a book about him and about the spiritual leadership that he gave to many cadets and how that has carried through. Our family was active in the Officers Christian Fellowship. So as a young girl, I knew about his influence on some of the leaders in that organization. But as a niece, I just looked forward to when we were going to see Uncle John again.
And what about sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Uncle Sandy was fairly serious in my mind. He was a discipline. He had children, a disciplinarian. He had children who were a little bit younger than me, a daughter who was born while he was in Vietnam, and then a son, and then an adopted daughter in between. So for him, I remember again, praying before meals when Uncle Sandy was there was definitely going to happen. He was a very fit athlete as well. And I guess just thinking of him as having moral fiber to him. And then being in Okinawa when he came to visit, I think my dad was deployed, and it was after one of his surgeries from being wounded in Vietnam, and just seeing his chest, raw from surgery and with metal inside it was just, devastating to me. And he kind of, he didn't make light of it really, but he certainly didn't put on me as a child the weight of what he must have felt at that time. And then Sarah, the warmest heart ever. She played guitar. She loved animals, a huge broad smile, just a really wonderful, caring woman, very fitting to someone who would become a career Army nurse. And she was a part of my life until her death. Way after I graduated college. But you see the toll, I saw the toll in my uncle's face, my Uncle Al's face, when around the time of my Uncle John's death. And I remember, giving updates to my Uncle Al as we worked on the accounting for his older brother. He called my dad his protector, and he knew that wherever he went as a young boy, if my dad was with him, they might get into some trouble, but my dad would get him out of it. Many decades later, after the accounting for my dad, my Uncle Al was then a commandant of cadets at Culver Military Academy in Indiana. And he called me and asked if I would go with him to Vietnam to take a group of young cadets at this military academy and show them some areas of Vietnam, and that he would like to take a side trip with me to see the site where my dad's airplane crash was. And so that was a really powerful thing again, as an adult young woman, to be able to go with him and hear some of the stories that he shared about the Army guys being so grateful for the air support that the pilots were giving, as we went over potholes on what was Highway 7, going down to a remote village north of Da Nang and south of Hanoi, where a villager had given our family a helmet from my dad. It was just so powerful to realize he had been there before. He knew what a triple canopy jungle was like. And as an urban advisor, he spoke Vietnamese. Back when I was in high school during the refugee, what was it called? the boat people, the Vietnamese boat people. I think they, not a very nice name, but they housed whole families in their home. So just seeing, like my mother said to me as a girl, you need to pray for the Vietnamese children whose dads are also gone in war. I saw him who had, physically taken a toll emotionally and physiologically, had lost two siblings, and then was taking care of South Vietnamese families. To me, that's putting your money where your mouth is, in just a very decent human servant heart kind of way.
Colleen, what do you know about their upbringing, the four of them?
They grew up in a proud, patriotic military family.
I'm assuming they moved a lot.
They did, and I don't know all the locations that they lived. By the time I was born, I think my grandfather was working as a vice president at Avon, and they were living in Westchester, New York.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I asked that is because, I'm a military brat. And so I know what it's like to grow up and, have to move every 3 years and, make all new friends. And I mean, it's kind of fun. Like, I'm not complaining about it. It was a great way to grow up, but I would imagine that for four siblings, the one constant that they had as the world kept changing around them growing up, the one constant they had was each other. And so I just wonder if you know anything about how they were with each other growing up.
They were very close. Sandy was, the protector. I think my dad's was Sandy's protector, Al's protector, and then I think Al was probably John's protector. So I think it was close knit. I think there was healthy competition. They were all involved. If you look at high school yearbooks, everybody was involved in many sports and other activities. And as I said, going on to athletics in college, my dad played football for Colgate College. And then, let's see, I think
guess Sarah either had three protectors or she didn't need any, right?
Yeah, I think she must have had three.
Yeah. So let's talk about Jonathan, and I'll find out, the years and the timelines of all this. But what do you know about the period right before he left for Vietnam, and then what happened to him in Vietnam?
I think I'm going to leave that to you to talk to them about, because anything that I can say will probably, I know what I've read. That's what I can say about that. So I will leave the history to them to say it. I know in talking to my Uncle John's widow, Gail, I was with her the first time she got to see the Vietnam Veterans Memorial and do a name rubbing of John's name. I know they were high school sweethearts and only newly married when he left. And I know that she helped, after learning that her husband had been killed, she was still helping other families. And that to me, again, it bespoke the kind of man John would choose in a wife. I don't know if you've ever read, it's an aside, but The White Cliffs of Dover, about World War II, and a mother working in a veterans hospital writing letters home for wounded soldiers, and they come to tell her that her own son is dead. My grandmother gave me that book when I was in high school, and I think it spoke to her heart. She worked for the Red Cross at that time as well. So my grandfather was, World War II, Korea. He was in the Army Air Corps, I think, in Korea or during Korea. I don't know if he actually went to Korea. But his wife was there working in the Red Cross. So I think there was a lot, our country was at war, and it was felt here at home, and the families of the military stuck together. I know when my Uncle John's was killed, my mom sent a ring to my Aunt Gail because symbolically her wedding ring had been shattered, in losing her husband. And my mom was over in Okinawa and she sent this beautiful ring to Gail. And then later, when I was going on a trip to Vietnam to work on my father's case to see what we could learn by interviewing the witness and sort of seeing with my own eyes what might be there, my Aunt Gail sent me her engagement ring. It was the West Point class ring that is often given as an engagement ring in a replica. So she sent that with me and she said, I wanted to make sure that you had a piece of your Uncle John with you as you search for your dad. So it's a loving family, a patriotic family, a faithful family, a connected family, and a very strong family, a brave family as a whole. And I think that was going on back then in the context of what war was. As I said, to be learning that your husband died and to still be there taking care of other families whose men were still deployed.
Yeah, it's not absolutely certain that I'll get a chance to talk to Sandy.
I'm banking on it. We'll try to figure this out. If not, I will read up and be able to speak more intelligently on them. We are in the throes of, multiple events this week, and I knew you wanted to talk to me, but I assumed I didn't need to have their histories.
Well, yeah, I'm not counting on you to be the official historian. I'm just wondering what, if you can just talk about what like what just top of mind. What do you know? What have you read? What is your understanding of what happened to John?
I'm going to send you a link to a book.
Okay.
I feel on the spot. It's
understood.
I guess I can just say it's too important. I can say he died in Cucci. Okay. I know he died in a way, like I was at the Silver Star pinning, what do you do with the silver, awarding of the Silver Star to a medic who was there at the time. And he said John had, like in his citation for his Purple Heart, he basically told the medic to go help somebody else while he, wounded, continued to fight to keep his men safe. So, but I can't do it justice.
It's okay.
I think
It's
the
okay.
details of war are important. And if you say them wrong, I think you do that soldier, airman, Marine, a disservice. So it is important.
I agree. We're not a history podcast. This is we're trying to just capture personal stories. So I'll bring it back to you. How old were you when this happened?
I was 6 when my Uncle John was killed in action.
And do you have any memory of your family receiving that news?
I have the memory of my mom telling me that it had happened and the finality of death. And then the next memory connected to that, other than seeing my Uncle Sandy wounded, was the difference of being sat down and told your dad is missing. And he could be dead, and I knew dead was never coming back. But he could not be, and he might be coming back, and he had just finished his survival training. So I guess the memories are a little bit mixed. I'm jumping here from Okinawa as a 6-year-old to upstate New York as an 8-year-old, having lived in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina in between. If I think of memories of my dad, I remember swimming with him during typhoons. He was a strong, big man, and there was a picnic table chained against the high winds, and it was flipping around, big, heavy picnic table, and we were swimming, and I felt safe. And that was pretty powerful. It was the Pacific Ocean. And then I remember as we were preparing to move to Myrtle Beach Air Force Base, my dad explaining the Atlantic Ocean and that it would be more tame. And I actually pictured an ocean with a fence around it, that had opening hours. And so obviously living through a couple of hurricanes in Myrtle Beach gave me great respect for the Atlantic.
Right.
Three walls of our house were ripped off in Hurricane Hugo,
I
and
was
the
there.
basement. Were you?
Yeah, I grew up in South Carolina. So did Jim.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Which part?
We're both from Columbia.
Okay.
Um,
I had good friends from there and, went there regularly.
yeah, I'll be headed back there shortly to visit my mother. But it keeps coming up this week for some reason. I recently talked to, well, we did an episode featuring Cleve McClary, who's from South Carolina. I was talking to somebody else for an interview, and he mentioned William Westmoreland, who's from South Carolina. And
Yeah.
then, and now you've got a South Carolina connection. I've got one. Jim's got one. There's somebody else I've missed just in the last week. South Carolina just keeps coming up in the course of doing this work. It's amazing.
I am doing, well, it must mean you're supposed to go home and see your mama.
I
That's
think
what
that
I
must
would
be
think.
it. That must be it. I mean, the flight's already booked. So, yeah, I'm definitely going. So, oh, actually, you know what? The flight's not booked. I better book that.
Oh, no. Yes, you
Yeah.
better. I was going to say there's a memorial, a Gold Star Families Memorial Monument with the Herschel Woody Williams Foundation in
Yeah.
Columbia.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and I've been going down to Myrtle Beach the last couple of weeks regularly to try to get one started and established on the old Myrtle Beach Air Force Base. They have a Warbird Park that has an A7 with my dad's name on it and a Shine Avenue. And I really think that having a Gold Star Families Memorial will be helpful there. Lots of veterans go through South Carolina.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned that when you were 6 years old and your mother gave you the news about your Uncle John, you used the phrase "the finality of death." That you remember that. Can you talk more about what that meant to you at 6 years old?
I guess I was aware war was going. I was in kindergarten with other kids whose dads were deployed on missions. I don't recall. I guess we had the United States had the base at that time. Japan now has that base. So we had riots as a kindergartner. Sometimes we had a Yankee go home, rocking of our school bus. There was concertina wire at the top of the fences around the the preschool and kindergarten elementary school area. So I guess it was just like a heightened sense of alert and awareness that there was good and evil going on in the world at that time, and that there was loss. John was the first loss I had had in my very young life. And I guess the way that my mom said it was enough to let me know she meant never. John wasn't deployed and coming back like dad was deployed and coming back. He wasn't on a mission he was gonna return from. And so that was just really sad.
Mm-hmm. And then, if you don't mind just telling again how John got home.
My dad was on his first tour in Vietnam when his younger brother was killed in action. He was flying F-105s at that time. And when Uncle John was killed, he flew his brother's body back escort to the United States for burial at West Point. And after, I know he stood vigil that night after the body was returned to the States. He stood vigil at West Point and then returned after the funeral to his job in Vietnam.
So he didn't stay very long? I mean, did you?
He did not. I was not there at the funeral. Our family didn't come. My mom had another child while we were in Vietnam. My younger brother was, while we were in Okinawa, which is where my family was when my dad's youngest brother was killed in action. We did not travel to the funeral with him. My dad flew his brother's body back for burial and stood escort the night before the funeral. And then the next day, and I'm botching it all up. He did not stand escort, he stood vigil.
Right.
Let me try again. So our family was stationed at Kadena Air Force Base in Okinawa when my father's younger brother was killed in action in October of 70 in Vietnam. My dad was on his first tour of action then, and he flew his brother's body back home for burial, stood vigil the night before the funeral, and then returned to his job in Vietnam.
So he didn't come back through Okinawa. I mean, you guys didn't get to see him.
I don't recall seeing him.
Okay. Okay. And if you don't mind just giving me kind of the brief summary of Sarah's service in Vietnam.
My aunt, I've been researching some of my aunt's service with the Red Cross in Vietnam lately. I had understood she was a nurse, and she was later a career Army nurse, but I think what she was doing is working in the morale and welfare in a hospital setting, toward the front lines of war. And she was probably doing, some physical care of patients and things probably like games and letters home and talking. So I don't have the records of her service there with Red Cross, but her mother had served with worked for the Red Cross in New York as a chapter president. And so I imagine that's where she learned about that possibility, is through her own mother. And I know it was, I've seen pictures of her. She looked like a little candy striper or something. She was not a donut dolly, is what we have learned, because they were official nurses. And she was not until after coming back from Vietnam, going to nursing school and becoming a career Army nurse.
Imagine. I mean, just imagine making that choice,
What I don't know.
I think I've talked to a lot of nurses, or a few, I should say, a few nurses, and it seems to me that for most of them, it was, they had skills that they knew were needed. They felt called to Vietnam. But your Aunt Sarah hadn't developed those skills yet, and she went anyway. She's like, whatever skills I've got, I'll just use those, I mean, that's just an amazing choice.
The one thing I would like to know is whether she had her guitar in Vietnam, because when she came home, she had a guitar. Yeah. And, she sang and brought joy in that way. And I think comfort in that way. So that's one of the reasons, I was just interested to know, like today I work with the International Committee of the Red Cross on other issues. And I see all the way trickled down to my grandmother and my aunt, what that one-on-one connection can mean in war. And I could picture that, were she playing for some of the wounded soldiers and airmen, that could have been a powerful healing thing. And I do know she didn't take guitar lessons before she went. So there has to be a connection there, but I haven't uncovered it yet to know for sure. Maybe Sandy can answer it.